Hello everyone and welcome to the first of our Twinfield Masterclasses. In today's session we will be covering some of the tips and tricks that Twinfield has to offer. Okay. Firstly, can everybody hear? Can everyone hear me? Okay, so if you can hear and you have sound, this is a great time for us to get started. Okay, so a warm welcome to everyone that's taken time out of their day to join this session. Okay, so my name's Karen Carbon and I've put my contact details above for you. And in today's session, is going to last about 30 minutes. So we have a small little slideshow that I'd like to take you through so you can see which topics we will be covering. We're going to be looking at our desktop configuration, how I can configure my desktop, and how we can introduce favorites. We'll be taking a look at our company settings, looking at how to set up our checkbooks under Cashbook and Banks, looking at our dimensions, looking into our links tab, which will allow us to apply either a cost center, apply a little bit of further analysis, and just explaining a bit on what that means. We also have our transaction types where we can configure our bank statements. We'll be looking at some importing and looking at how we work with our provisional transactions. Okay, so let's get started with today's demo. Okay, so now I'm on my Twinfield desktop, and the first thing that I would like to do is start configuring my desktop. So I consider my desktop to be my workflow. So along the middle, I have a series of desktop icons, and I can have up to a total of 9. So everyone's workflow can be slightly different, but to speed up time and to save us from having to maneuver around our menu items, we can create these shortcuts, which is going to be great for your staff and also great if you're outsourcing the product and you want someone to onboard and use the product easily. So how do we configure our desktop? The first thing we need to do is go to our settings button. So if we click on our settings, we have a choice of who and how we can configure our roles. Is the role for ourselves? Do we want to configure for a group of roles? So do we have a group of users assigned to one role that carry out very similar tasks? Or is it for a specific user? So if it's just for one specific user, they may just want a specific role. So to start adding additional desktop icons, we can do one of two things. We can either click into this little icon right at the side, which is our add button, and it will add and insert a new desktop icon. So if I click on the blue button, then what it does, it just duplicates the original, it just duplicates the original function before. So now all I need to do is to move into the second column. So we're looking at types, and based on our types, it will give us our options. So if we go to functions, functions is going to be all of the different features and functions hanging off your menu bars. But if you want to go into a specific action, so for example, I'm going to be raising some purchase invoices, I want to launch straight into that function. So under type, I can choose the option transaction type. This gives me a shorter options which I can choose from. So if I click on the drop down, from the list, I can choose purchase invoice. And if I also want to enter in bank transactions, I can just repeat the step again. So I can either add and insert or click the plus line. It will duplicate the function for me. And once again, I'm going to choose transaction type. And from the drop-down menu, I can choose this time to go to my bank. So I've got my Barclays Bank showing for me. Once you've completed and you've added in all of your desktop functions, simply click Save. And once you've clicked Save, your desktop will refresh and we can see that we have our Purchase Invoice button and I have my Barclays Bank button as well. So how about if you want to add some reports but you don't want the reports to be on your desktop? So the solution would be to use your favourites. So just as a reminder, the little star at the top is our favourites, and any options that we add to our favourites will appear under this icon. So let's start going in and adding some reports. So some of the go-to reports that I would use is under Accounting. Under the heading Overview, I have Reports. So if I select Reports, and if I select Customers, I can start adding my customer aging report by just hovering over the report, and I can see that I have a grey star. So if I click the grey star, it turns yellow. And if I do the same again for my customer transactions, if I now go back to my favourites icon, I can see those reports have now been added. And I can just carry on that process by clicking the back button. And if there's a general ledger report that I tend to use, so once I've opened up my general ledger report option, one of the reports that I use quite a lot is my general ledger balances per period. So once again, just hover over the report, wait for the grey star to appear and click the icon. So now I'm going to return back to the main menu, and under my star I can see now that I have those 3 reports which I have now added. Okay, so the next tip that we're going to have a look at is our cash book and banks area. So under General, under the heading Company, we have cash books and banks. So any bank accounts which you would like to create or you would like to just amend or view is going to be held in this section. So to view your bank accounts, simply just double click in the field and it will list all of your bank accounts for you. If you need to add a bank account, simply just type the bank account code in the code field without any spaces. Once you've typed in your bank code, click Next. So this bank account that I'm going to be creating is going to be my Euro bank account. So if I click into the name field, this bank account is going to be my HSBC Euro account. And you can just copy and paste the short name into the field. And then we need to enter in just the usual details. So we've got our 8-digit account number, the account name, and if you have things like the IBAN and the BIC code to hand, you can put that in. And then also we will need to make sure that we include the general ledger code, so it has its own unique code. So when we post transactions, we can actually see those transactions by running a report. And we can see that which transactions have hit the ledger. So let's start by entering in our 8-digit number. So I'll keep it nice and simple. And let's enter in the account name. In the National Bank ID field, this is our sort code. And just remember, when you're entering in the sort code, there's no spaces and no hyphens. And the next thing we need to do is apply our general ledger code. So to apply our general ledger code, if we know where our bank range is, or we can just type in the word bank, that will open up and take us to our range. So on my chart of accounts, I can see that I already have a Euro bank account. So if I select that code, and then the next thing we need to do is to tell Twinfield that this is one of our Euro bank accounts. And to do this, we just click on our little orange button called Transaction Types. So once we click on the Transaction Type button, under the General tab, we have our fourth option down is for currency. And from the drop down, just select euros or select the relevant currency. And once you've made all changes, you can simply just save. Okay, so that's a nice simple setup of how you would configure your multi-currency bank accounts. Okay, so in a lot of UK businesses, they use checkbooks and use paying in slips. So one of the top questions that we do get asked on the support desk is how do we configure to use a checkbook and paying in slip in Twinfield? Okay, so once again from the general menu, let's go back to company and down to cash book and banks. And if I double click again in the code field to bring up all of my bank accounts, now this time I'm going to go into bank number 2, which is my Lloyds Bank, and click next. Okay, so to configure the checks, on the right hand side we have our checks option. So if we click on checks, and this time we will need to click the little tick box to say yes, I would like to register checks. So in the name field, I just need to tell Twinfield that this is my Lloyds checkbook. And I can just copy and paste into the short name field. So we need a separate nominal code for our general ledger checks. Okay, so this time I'm going to click on the little dimension star, and what this will do is overlay another screen for me and take me into my dimension types. So this needs to be a balance sheet code, so let's click open. And in the code field, I'm just going to type in Lloyds once more. And I can see that I already have a nominal code in place for my Lloyds check account. So what we need to do is just do a couple of little settings to make our checkbook available. So if we now click into our nominal code for our checks, and we're going to head over to the links tab. Okay, so when we're writing out our checks, we're writing out one check to one supplier. So we have a one-to-one relationship. So in order for Twinfield to understand that we're only going to be writing out one check to one supplier, we need to add the further analysis. So we need to select from the drop down and say yes. Okay, so that's our first step. The next step is to tell Twinfield that yes, I'm adding further analysis, but what am I adding the further analysis to? So we're going to be writing the checks to our suppliers. So we need to make sure that we're adding in the rule to let Twinfield know that we're adding our supplier. So just click the add button and leave the type. So that's the default setting that it will come up with. And if you double click into the code field next to type, you can now select accounts payable. So this way Twinfield knows when we want to raise a check that it's going to raise a check for one specific supplier. So if we now click save, our nominal code is now populated in the field. So now we just need to enter in a checkbook range. So this could be a generic range to start off with, because you might want to actually have a bank template of your own that you've already configured in your template. So what we can do is just enter in a dummy range of numbers, and then when you are configuring your client's account and you're putting in the account range, if they've supplied you with the check numbers, then you can go into this area and just update these fields. So I'm going to keep it nice and simple with a 6-digit code. So I'm just going to use 100001, and in the to box I'm going to use 100999. So we just have a short range. So if I now tab away, you will notice underneath it's giving me the space to enter in another check range, which is perfectly fine. So as and when your range finishes, you may want to just keep adding in additional check number ranges. And if you need to configure your bank account to allow for deposits from your customers, we can just repeat the steps again by just clicking yes. And then in the name, I'm just going to call this Lloyd's Deposits. And just copy and paste the name once again. In the General Ledger Account field, if I now just click the Dimensions button once more, and under Balance Sheet, click Open. And in the code field, let me just type in Lloyd's again. I can see that I have my Lloyd's Deposits. So once more, we need to click on the Links tab. Okay, so this is where it gets a little bit different. So when you've got your deposits coming through, so you're working with your paying in slip, you could have 5 checks that you need to enter in on a paying in slip. So when I fill in a paying in slip, if I've got multiple checks, I'll fill in just one paying in slip, which will house all of those checks. And Twinfield uses the same logic. So this time we don't need to add the further analysis because we're not specifying one paying in slip to one customer. We can say on that paying in slip, we can have a range of different customers. So we're going to leave the further analysis as no. But one of the things we do need to change is the matchable. And when we talk about matchable, it really just means to contra or offset. So I need to make sure that I can offset the payments, the individual payments against my customers. So from the drop down, let's select matchable. And there's no need on the deposit account to add any links. So once you've finished, just simply click Save. And once you're happy with all the changes that you've made, click the Save button. And once you've clicked the Save button, you will be taken back to your desktop. Okay, so that's the setup for our checkbooks and for our paying in slip. But one thing to bear in mind is our company settings. And the last piece in the puzzle to make sure that our checks work smoothly and we don't get any error messages when we're posting is to make sure that you have the relevant settings flagged in your company settings. So from our general menu, let's go to company and then down to settings. And we're just going to go 3/4 of the way down, and we just have this option here, allow multiple control accounts for accounts receivable and payable. Just ensure this is ticked. And this is one of the things you could have mandatory ticked in your template. So it's always going to be there as a default for you. So once you've applied all your settings, simply click Save. And let's return back to the desktop. Okay, so now that we're back on our desktop, one of the top questions that we also get asked on the support desk is how do we deal with importing? So I have a little question for you that I would like, I've got a little question that I'd like to ask. Okay, so we've just launched a poll question. So this poll question is now open for you. And if I can ask you to either answer yes or no to the question on the screen. Okay, so we're going to give you a few more seconds to make sure we've got all your votes registered. Okay, so now we've shared our poll question with you. So we've actually got quite a close decision. We've got a 40 to 60 split. So 40% of you saying yes, you've imported in data into Excel using multi-worksheets, and 60% of you have said no. Okay, so I'm going to go with the majority. Okay, so this is going to be a refresher for those of you that already know how to do this. But for the 60% of you that have said no, okay, let's go back to Twinfield and let me show you how this can be done. Okay. Okay, so from the file menu, from the general menu, I need to go into the file manager. So once I'm in the file manager, let's click browse. And this is going to take me through to my multi-worksheet. So if I double click, and I'm now going to upload my Excel file, and this time I'm going to click on the blue menu button and choose under actions, I'm going to choose import. Okay, so it tells me a bit about the file that I've imported, but this is the section that we need to pay most attention to if we're using a multi-worksheet from Excel, is our filtering options. So right from the drop down, I have my 3 tabs on my Excel sheet. So I've got some static data, which is my accounts payable and my accounts receivable. But then I also have some sales transactions that I'd like to import in for August. So let's go with importing in those sales invoices. Okay, so I've selected my sheet, and Twinfield's trying to preempt which type of template that I want to use. So this is sales transactions. So if I click on the template and just click on the drop down, I can see that I have my purchase/sales transactions. So let's click into that option and let's click process. Okay, so once you've clicked process, we just need to refresh our screen, and I can see that the import has gone through successfully. Okay, so when we import in transactions into Twinfield, they always import in as a provisional transaction. So how do we manage those provisional transactions? So if we now go back under accounting, and under accounting, let's go to provisional transactions. In this area, you can see that I've got quite a couple of transaction types available for me to view. So I've got my purchases, and I've also have my sales. So let's click into sales. And I can see that I've got 40 transactions which I would like to process through. So once you've gone through and you've reviewed all of your 40 lines, okay, we need to go back in and just process them. So you can actually stay within this screen and process all of those lines by just clicking on this little icon here, which is our post as final icon. So if I just click and then return back to each of the different line items, I can just continue to select all of those line items. Okay, so now that I've selected all of my line items, I can now just click process. It will always come up with a confirmation, and I can click OK. So to speed things up a little bit, I tend to just click on the refresh button, which is just in the left-hand side. So if I click the refresh, I can now see that all of those transactions have been processed. And it's much easier to handle it from within this screen where you can see all the transactions, because from the back button, you have nowhere to refresh. So this is a much more convenient option. And if something hasn't gone through, you can actually see it at a glance. Okay, so now let's return back to the desktop. Okay, so let's go through and just have a little recap. So we've recapped configuring our desktop. We've had a look at our company settings where we applied the tick for our checks. We've had a look at our cash book and banks. We've also had a look at our dimensions as well. So our dimensions, which we had a look at, was when we were configuring our bank accounts and just adding in a bit of extra further analysis. Our transaction types, so we configured our multi-currency bank accounts. We had a look at importing, and we also had a look at our provisional transactions.